Hey guys, George at SoundTraxx here, and this week we have another big announcement coming from SoundTraxx. And as you can see in the background, I have a big boy. Now this week we are announcing a new addition to the Tsunami2 Steam product lineup called the Tsu-Big Steam. Now this is a decoder that has the unique and exclusive recordings of the 4014 Big Boy. So that allows us to give you the sounds of the 4014 Big Boy in the Tsunami2 sound system. Now, this Tsunami2 Big Steam decoder will be available only on the website and select retailers, so be sure to check out the website or check out your local retailer and ask about the Tsunami2 Big Steam. Now, let's take a look while we install the Tsu-Big Steam TSU2200 into this Broadway Limited Precision Craft Models Big Boy that I did a conversion years ago into an original Tsunami long before I had the name on my shirt. Now we're going to go through and do the installation, then we're going to play around with it and hear it. So let's get started. Okay guys, so I've got this tender here and we're ready to take it apart. So the first thing, like I said, it's been a few years since I've looked at this. So looking at the underside of this tender, I can see 2 screws, one up here in the front, 2 in the back. So it looks like that's what we're going to need to remove to get the body shell off so we can access our decoder. So we take those out and we'll set those aside so we know those are the front. And then we're going to disassemble the back, or take these back 2 screws out. And there we go, we got 2 screws. And now on this one, we do need to remove the coupler because the coupler cut bar rides underneath of the coupler plate. So we just need to remove that so we can easily remove the tender floor. And now we have to carefully grab this stuff so that it will, there we go. And the coupler is over there. Now you can see we've got that removed. So now we can easily remove our body shell and access the model. And let's take a look and see what we've got. Hey guys, when I had done this installation, I was actually recording every step, and I had done a step-by-step showing how to remove the original Tsunami out of the way and the original speakers. Well, unfortunately, that video got corrupted. So I'm going to give you a short abbreviation of what we did. Now, when I had this decoder installed, this decoder sat right here. The wires were the wires that you're seeing here. Now, on the original Tsunami, we have this 9-wire harness connector that you can see visible in this shot. But what we do is we take an X-Acto knife and we just come along the edge right here, trim the sides, and then you can trim a little bit on the back. And that accesses our harness that we can now simply unplug and pull away. Now we take our TSU1000 decoder out of the model, and then we plug in our TSU2200. So this was the biggest thing. When you're replacing your TSU1000, you can remove the harness and then just simply plug in our TSU2200, which I believe you will see coming up here in just a moment. So sorry about that. I apologize for, the video being corrupted or whatever the case happened. We'll take a look and try to investigate and figure out what happened. But in the meantime, this is the brief overview of what we did. So let's get back to the install. Okay, so now that we've got our TSU1000 pulled out and out of the way, now we need to look at these speakers. And they look like 28mm rounds, so we should be okay. Now we're going to test these speakers and take a look at them, see what the ratings are, because of course we want to make sure that we have speakers that are able to handle 2 watts. We also want to make sure they're wired in series. So in this case, there's just 2 screws, one on each side here, and then this top plate moves up and out of the way. And so we're going to undo these screws now. So there's one. These are pretty long here. All right, now let's put the second one out of the way. Now let's lift up our plate. And as I see, it looks like I've got 2 28mm speakers, but they also look fairly generic. They don't say anything at all about the wattage on them, so in an effort to be safe, I am going to remove them, take them out, and we're going to put 28mm round speakers from SoundTraxx that are 2 watt, and we're going to go ahead and put those in place. It does look like they are wired in series, so there it is, good. So let's take these out, and they're just setting here on top. So you can kind of see how that is wired up. So we're going to take these speakers, we're going to move them out of the way. Now we're going to grab 2 of our 28mm round speakers from SoundTraxx. We're going to open up the packaging, and then we're going to wire them up the way they need to be. So I'm just going to cut right along here. We'll take this speaker out. Okay, now I have 2 speakers that we're going to want to wire in series. And this time we're going to use the wires for our TSU 2200. We're going to go directly to the speaker itself. So we're going to turn on our soldering iron, and we're going to strip and tin the ends of these wires. Now this one we're only going to go a few inches, so we can cut this one down a little bit. And now this is some of our wire that we sell. So if you need purple wire, you can order that at SoundTraxx.com or from your local retailer. Now with this, we're going to tin the ends of this wire. Put some flux on the ends. And then while I've got the flux in hand, I'm going to go ahead and put flux on the terminals here on the speaker. Now if you notice on this speaker, you can see that it looks like there's 4 solder pads. But what's actually going on here is these outer 2 are where you want to solder to the wires. These inner 2 are actually where the voice coil is soldered to. So you don't want to be soldering on these blobs right here up against the middle. Use the bare pads at the very outer edges of the speaker. All right, now with our soldering iron ready to go, we're going to put a little solder on the end. We're going to tin the ends of the wire. All right. Now, before we do this, we want to get a tool so that we can help hold it down so that the speaker magnet doesn't attract to the soldering iron and potentially damage the speaker long term. So we're going to grab a pair of tweezers. We're going to hold this wire. Get just a little bit of solder on the end here. And just like that. And get the other one. And we're going to do the same thing with the other speaker. So we're going to put our tool, rest on it. And again, we're just doing this to make sure that it doesn't jump up and attract to the soldering iron. Now we put this here. And there we go. So now these are soldered in series. Now remember, when you're doing these in series, this will come in from the decoder. This is the second terminal on the first speaker, goes to the first terminal on the second speaker, and then the other speaker wire will come. Now if you notice, we were through the center hole on this, so before we make our soldering joint, we want to run these wires. So we're going to gently undo the fanciful knot at the end here. Now the green and the brown wire here, we're going to take and separate. We're not going to use this on this installation, so we can cut these wires short and set that as aside. And then we'll tape that to the top of our decoder here in just a second. But what we're interested in are the 2 purple wires. So we want to check to make sure we have the orientation correct. So we're going to feed this through the 2 holes there. Now we probably don't need this much wire, so we can cut this a little bit short. So we're going to cut off, I don't know, a couple inches off the end of here, maybe 3 inches off the end, so that we don't need too much wire sticking out the end. Now again, we're going to strip and tin the ends of the wire. So we get our stripper tools. Oops, that's a little much. And that's a little much too, but we can always trim that down a little bit. We're going to twist the ends. Make sure there's no frayed wire or anything sticking out like that. All right, now we're going to get our flux. We're going to put a little bit of flux on the ends of the wires here. Now we'll get our soldering iron. A little bit of solder on the end here. And we're just going to touch the end of the wire. We're going to tin it. There's one. And there's two. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to trim the excess off of here because, again, you want to have as minimal amount of wire exposed as possible. So we can always trim the excess wire. Now we're going to get our, I'm going to push this back a little bit here. We're going to get our tool. Now we're going to set that one on there. We're going to take our first wire and we're going to solder to the terminal on the first speaker. So again, we get a little bit of solder on the end. There we go. Okay, now we're just going to change things up here a little bit. Put the tool handle over there. Grab our second speaker wire. Let's get a little bit of excess solder here. And we're just going to solder this to the outer pad on this one. And there you go. Just like that, these are soldered in place and ready to be installed. Now again, we have our wires going through this terminal. Now one thing you can do is, if you don't want to do this beforehand, you can trim back of the insulation here a little bit, like we revealed the plug on this side. You can actually unplug this 4-wire harness, but I will caution you that these wires are a lot more susceptible to pulling out. So I would recommend a tool to pull this out, and we have the tool linked in the description below. It's a little end cutter that you can grip the sides of that plug and plug it out. So I don't recommend doing that by hand, but all right, so now we're going to bring our decoder, our model back over. We're going to take our speakers. We're going to mount them onto this 28mm housing, just like this. Now, one thing we can do here is we want to make sure that the solder pads are where they need to be, and we can take our tweezers and kind of make sure that the wire goes down in between these two speakers here to make sure that they're going to apply, make sure that the speaker wires are tucked away. Now we're going to take this housing and we're going to gently put it on top of these speakers, just like that. And we can pull our wires up through the housing right there. All right, and there we go. We want to make sure that everything's lined up. And we're going to take our screws and put them back in place. And there we go. So now our speaker conversion has been done. Our speakers are wired in series. Now the only thing left is to plug in our TSU 2200 into the harness. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to mount some double stick foam tape. We're going to mount the decoder and then we'll tape these wires down. So, let's get some double stick foam tape. We're going to cut a piece and we're just going to mount this decoder right here. Alright, so put that right there. Peel it up. Now one other thing you could do is, if you take these two wires, you could put them on the tape, but we want to make sure that the decoder stays in place where it needs to. So we're going to put this down just like that right there. Alright, and now the only thing left is to tie these wires down. So let me get a piece of tape. This is just a piece of Kapton tape, and what we're going to do here is I'm going to do a little double-handed motion here. I'm going to grab these wires with one pair of tweezers, put them where I want them, and then we're going to take this tape, lay it down, and then we're going to put the tape where we going. Okay, so now all we got to do is button it up. So we want to tuck in these wires, make sure everything looks okay, make sure all the wires stay inside the body shell, and we check to make sure everything's lined up properly. We make sure we don't have anything lost or tucked underneath. So it looks like we're good to go. So now we take our 2 screws from the front, and we're going to put those in place. Grab our screwdriver and tighten them down. Take our 2 screws from the back and put those in place. And just on the off chance, we're going to wait and put the coupler in last. We're going to go test this thing out. We're going to make sure everything works and looks good, and make sure it makes sound. Make sure the audio is high quality. Okay, here I am on the layout. I've got the Locomotive, or I've got the decoder down here on the track. We've got our Locomotive on. Let's take a test. It's making sound. Looks like we've got sound. Let's check our lights. We've got our reverse light on. It looks like we're ready to go. So let's go upstairs and put this coupler back on. All right, it looks like everything works great. So we're going to go ahead and install the coupler. So this one's a little tricky because we have to assemble everything together. And one thing I will be doing, I'm going to cut the rest of this trip pin off. All right, so now what we're going to do, we need to put the bottom plate in place. Now this is an actual KD coupler box that I used. You can use any box that fits your need. I believe it comes with it. I wanted the KD box because I think the world of the guys at KD, so I wanted to make sure to have their name on there since I'm using their couplers. All right, everything's there. We just need to line it up, put the screw in place, and tighten the screw down. And there you go. So now let's go hook it up to the Locomotive. We'll do some test runs, and we'll show you some cool features that we've got built into this decoder. So now I've got the Locomotive connected to the decoder in the tender. So now we can move our Locomotive forward. Now with our Big Steam decoder, you will actually get the sound of the big boy exhaust chuff, and it's also defaulted to have that articulated chuff, so that way you get the 8 chuffs per revolution, like we've talked about in past videos. Now you can set this up with and without wheel slip. Now some of the other sounds, of course, is the iconic big boy whistle. That was actually recorded off of the 4014. Now, of course, we also have the big boy bell that was recorded off of the 4014. And as I mentioned, the exhaust chuff, but there's a few other different sounds that are actually built into this Big Steam decoder that are designed to match bigger steam. For example, we've talked about the injectors in the past. Now, on the big boy like this, it's a feedwater system. And so on function 20, instead of hearing the injectors, you'll actually hear the feedwater system. So it's one of those sounds that you'll hear that's going to be a little bit different to help give characteristic. A couple of other things that are built into the decoder is the sound of the air compressor. Now this is the one that was actually taken again off of the 4014. Now, as we've talked about in the past, when we trigger the automatic brake sequence, we trigger on F12. And once I turn this on, you hear the air compressor cycle more quickly as it's working to charge the train line, but also consistently because, again, it's working to charge a train line. Now, it'll run this way about 30 seconds. Now, one of the other sounds that's unique from the 4014 Big Boy is the sound of the dynamo. So when I turn on the headlight,
you hear that dynamo spool up, and that was again recorded off of the 4014. So these are some of the sounds that we've built into the Big Steam decoder, so that way you have, again, more options now to match wider range of different Big Steam locomotives that may use a feedwater heater system or stuff like that, not just the big boy 4014. So be sure to check out SoundTraxx.com, where you can find these web-exclusive decoders available in our TSU 2200, the TSU 1100, and the TSU 21P NEM8, available on our website at SoundTraxx.com and select retailers now.